All right, friends, we are back right here in studio with the guest we've been talking about all show, Mr. Ryan Preece, Lightning Preece.
Oh, yeah.
I know, you just don't like it when I say that.
You know, every time I saw you, because I was following you around that entire media day, it was Preece Lightning.
Because I know
every
time. After the first one, and then you kept saying Super Sugar. Those are like two nicknames that we both don't really embrace anymore. It's just like now you made it to the Cup Series, and you're like, gosh, I just kind of want to be Ryan Preece, and I kind of want to be Corey LaJoie. So welcome back to the show.
Thanks.
Not Stacking Pennies, the actual show, the Cup Series. What a journey it's been.
Yeah, you've been through the same journey, right? Like
it's different. Mine and yours are different. We're very similar in a lot of ways, but yours is very unique, man. So tell people a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I mean, everything about my career, and Ryan's seen it in the modified side forever just because of the Blewett connection, right, has been backwards. When I raced modifieds, I didn't go to the SK modified and then tour type modified. It was straight for the tour types. I ran the wheel modified tour, then I ran weekly, on top of that as well. So it's just been back and forth and, racing in 2016 with Johnny Davis and then going to do JGR stuff and then
talk about that for a second. So you took an investor.
No.
Right?
Well, I mean, there was Eddie, the guy I drove for with the modified, and then there was another guy that helped me. Yeah. So it was and
you pushed all the chips onto the table.
Yeah.
When did you decide to leave the modified tour and go bush racing? Like when was that?
I keep not blaming, but so Tommy Baldwin in 2013, I think you were actually supposed to drive that car.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess you didn't end up doing it.
Loudon maybe?
It was
Richmond?
Loudon. Yeah, 2013. Well, then I went and did that race. And then it was 2014, I did two other races. I did Homestead and Loudon. And it was just like getting you through that approval process because I didn't have a big sponsor. I didn't have somebody to really fund that, full season or anything and go through that. So we just, for 3 years, it was do races here and there, get through the approval process. And then 2016 was when I went and did that full year at Johnny Davis. And
what was your first bush race like? Like, what was the biggest difference between modified racing and bush racing?
I mean, the first time you get in something like that, you just don't want to be that guy that wrecks right then and there, right?
That Corey what do you tell everybody when they make their first Cup start?
Don't get on TV.
Yeah.
Don't be on TV.
Yeah, don't be on TV. Because if you're on TV, you're either that guy's holding up the leaders or you're back in the fence.
That happened. Homestead, actually. I think that was my second or third, or maybe it was the fourth Cup race. I was trying to get out of Kyle Larson's way, and I ended up, I think, blocking him or something by accident. And, I made Twitter highlights for a solid few weeks.
Yeah, Elliott Sadler was going to kick your ass one time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember that at Homestead?
So. No.
When he was racing for a championship and he was mad because Ryan was racing him and he lost. I don't know. I don't even remember what happened. But
you were in the 18 then, right?
It was. Yeah. And they were. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
He just wanted you to go by. He just wanted you to let him by, and you were racing. You're like, dude, I'm racing for a job.
Yeah. So
came in a race. I think about some notable guys who went from modifieds and had a solid Cup career. Guys like Jeff Bodine, Steve Park's another one. Were you a Steve Park fan growing up?
A little bit, yeah. I think I'm more of a fan now because whenever I crack my screen on my phone, I go see him and he takes care of it, and that's usually every 1 or 2 months.
Shout out to Steve Park. If you want to see him, he owns the Batteries Plus off of 150.
150, yeah.
Go in there, stop in see Steve Parks. But so you're back with your best opportunity in NASCAR to date, driving the 41 for Stewart Haas Racing.
Yeah.
What are the expectations this year?
My personal expectations, I'm pretty aggressive. I'm saying we got to win. That's why I was very adamant. Chad Johnson's my crew chief, which I've had a year and a half of working with him already, and I was really pushing for that because I feel like growing up, we always hear about needing that crew chief driver relationship and gelling, and I never understood that completely until I got to this level. And then I worked with Chris Gabehart before. I worked with Chad, and I just over the years, I've figured out what I need to succeed.
What is that?
Somebody that'll tell me to shut up and somebody I trust, right? Like, because I'm somebody who's gotten, just like you, very hands-on my race car, and sometimes I just need to focus on driving.
Yeah.
And but that takes a level of trust in somebody for someone like me, and Chad's that guy. So
what's the initiation process, if you will? Because you had 3 years at JTG, had a lot of experience in the Cup Series. I'm sure the initiation process of a Stewart Haas is something new. And what was that onboarding? What in terms of simulation meetings? I mean, what does that process look like?
It's been never ending. I can tell you, you're there. There's always something going on. But as far as Chad and I and that process of just getting in the groove of things, that was easy already, just because we've already worked with each other, we've won with each other, and as far as my level of communication of how I describe things, he's already got that. And even going to the sim, right? Like, you want your engineers to understand kind of what you're saying. I guess, Tony Stewart used to say tripping on the right front, where us asphalt guys, I say it's dive into the right front, right? So it's just trying to understand the different lingos and, but
you've been part of that team though. It's not like you didn't just walk in January 1st. You've been there working out last year. The Rick Ware, you went in the Rick Ware car you drove last year at the Coliseum.
Yeah, I think there's still rubber getting into turn 3 from my left front locking up. I bet you there's still some.
But that was more or less a Stuart Haas effort, right? That was a Stuart Haas kind of an effort with Rick Ware Alliance.
No, that was strictly a Rick Ware car. I remember we were a week and a half away, and I went over there to sit in the seat, and there wasn't really anything together at all. So I helped him throw the motor in, and from there it was just me and Tommy. To be honest with you, Tommy Baldwin, crew chiefed it out there, so it was like a modified deal, but we made it, so it was cool.
You'd be prepared a little more this year, though, getting in there.
A lot more. Yeah, for sure. But at the same time, everybody's had a year with this car. It's not like it was last year where everybody was going out. Some people were running 400-pound springs. Some were running 1,500-pound springs. I feel like everybody has a pretty good baseline as far as what they think's going to work.
You're a short track guy, right? We talked about before the show started your favorite short track being Riverhead. What do you equate this place to in your short track travels, really?
Riverhead this place is super grip. I mean, LA last year was tons of grip, way more grip than I actually thought. And to be honest with you, it was probably the best quarter-mile track that I had ever been on, just because the maneuverability. My car didn't drive very bad. So I felt like I could really move around and try to make speed. But, yeah, I think growing up on the quarter miles, whether it was Monadnock up in New Hampshire, Riverhead Raceway, racing at Charlotte Motor Speedway on their little quarter-mile track, or, some of those places, you just learn to be aggressive. It's no different than you being from Wall and that really aggressive mentality of you can't get held up for too long because you're giving up too much time, and how to set up a pass.
Talk to me about This is a good one because NASCAR just took over a lot of the quarter midget stuff.
Oh, okay.
Talk to me about Silver City. Like, do you still talk?
What is Silver City?
Silver City is a quarter midget track right there in Connecticut. Do you know the list of people that have come out of there in, like, Ryan Preece's era?
No.
Ryan, Logano,
Joey, Bobby Santos, Doug Kobe,
Woody Pitcat, James Savali,
yep.
Alan Cavana.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, Tina Theriault.
Did he drive?
Mm-hmm. Tina Theriault is the
Alan
head.
Cavana drove?
Yeah. Yep. Tina Theriault is the head of content.
The guy with the hair?
Yeah. He's a Silver City kid.
Oh, yeah. We're all from up there.
Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah, Tina Theriault just started at Penske. She's like the head of marketing.
Oh, no way.
Yes, dude, Silver City kids everywhere.
Yep.
Cheetah race cars so obnoxious when we were younger.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
David Gravel.
Yep.
You and David Gravel raced together.
Mm-hmm. We did.
Burning Boilers car.
It was the same thing as Joey. That's right. It was the same thing as Joey. Joey left basically the year that I was getting in, and then I raced against David for 1 year, and then I left because I had an older brother that raced, so I was kind of just following him around. But Silver City was a lot of fun. I mean, it was only 5 minutes from our house, and I'm happy. I'm happy I got into racing.
Do you ever talk to Joey? Like, have you rekindled that friendship since you moved down here and lean on him at all? Or who do you lean on the most for advice down here?
Obviously, Kevin's always been somebody that I can lean on. And but Joey, I shot him a text just asking a few questions from Phoenix. So there is, anytime he sees me, he goes, "Hey, Preece." But
what the frick's going on, Preece?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you this, though, because it's always interesting, guys who have a period of, I don't know, patience or waiting or whatever you wanted to call it, to like get back to the show, to get back the opportunity to be where you want to be, and now you have weathered that test of time. How many times did you want to give up in that window?
I think my wife got sick of hearing me say, well, I could always go modified racing, just because from the background that I've done, I've always found a way to make a living racing, whether it's modifieds or whatever it may be. I'll figure something out. But as far as playing the waiting game, you're right. I've seen a lot of people do it over the past, and it's worked out. Me personally, I was just saying this to Doug Kobe a week ago, was how, I mean, when we get into November, and most of these guys know what they're doing in May or as early as now. This is I'm used to not knowing, so it's not. I don't get very nervous, I would say, but yeah, I knew what I wanted, and I was going to go after it. There was other opportunities where I could have went and raced in Xfinity. I've said it.
What was it that you wanted?
To have a full-time ride in the Cup Series at SHR. With somebody that I felt comfortable, crew chiefing, and ultimately I got everything that I wanted, and that comes. There's a lot of things that you have to do to make all that happen, and I was relentless, so it all worked out.
That's what I noticed, right? It's not that you just didn't give up. You also never stopped knowing that you were going to get a shot. You were going to get that shot.
Yeah.
So what do you think are just a couple measurables? Winning a race, making the playoffs is an easy one. Is a easy one to put on the board, right? What are some other ones?
Realistically, there is some things I'll look back at as statistics-wise, but consistency is one of them. Whether that starts as top 15s or whatever week in and week out, and then you move that to top 10s, then top 5s, and then you're consistently running, racing for wins. Ideally, I want to say we have to make the playoffs. We have to win a race. But at the end of the day, consistency, having speed loading, coming off the truck, just being there and constantly working on the communication between you, myself, and Chad, and Chad's communication with Lee and all our other engineers to help speed that process up, because you guys already have a year of doing that. Now, I was at SHR, but there was a lot of things that I wasn't necessarily seeing.
Right.
I wasn't seeing the whole picture, where now I am, and working with a guy that I trust, and him communicating all that information to me just is going to make it that much better. So
you said you signed your development driver contract, which was also something that you haven't seen in a while. KHI represents you, and they orchestrate this deal to put you in the stable without really an idea of where that was going to transpire. It was pretty obvious that it was a pretty down year for SHR, where Kevin Harvick goes from winning 9 the year prior, or 2 years prior, and he wins 2, right? Chase Briscoe wins 1. Mm-hmm. And as an organization, it was a pretty low year. So what are some things internally that they're going to change or adjust to try to get back to the SHR of old?
Well, I think that's just part of the process. You guys, of all people, know in racing, it's a part of the process, and being a part of that and continuing to make strides going forward. If you just sit there and wonder why you're not running good, and you continue to do that, guess what? You're not going to run good. And so obviously Rodney and Kevin's relationship, and Chase and Eric and their relationship with Drew, and this is bad that
Klossmeyer.
Old Johnny.
Old Johnny, I love him. He's always smiling.
He's awesome.
But and mine with Chad, it's just the continuing to keep evolving and hopefully get ahead, because in racing, you want to win a lot of races. Usually it's because you have some sort of advantage. So, I'm that type of guy that wants to snoop around the garage and see what's going on. I know you walk around and you pretend like you aren't looking, but you're
chumming up with this guy or this underneath guy, and I'm like, I got sunglasses on. Meanwhile, I got one eye looking at him and one eye looking at where they're totally.
Secrets,
it's funny.
I know they ain't listening to the podcast
because Ryan, you do that all the time too.
What, play dumb?
Oh yeah,
no way,
all the time.
Hey, let me tell you a old veteran trick that my grandpa does.
Yeah,
he'll go when we were K&N racing. Dad would stand, and I'm like, what the hell is he doing? He'd be standing next to Eddie McDonald or, one. Larson's car, somebody that ran good, and he would put his hand door tops or rear quarter panel, and he'd put his finger wherever on his leg, his quarter panel would line up, and he'd literally walk across the garage with his finger in the same spot and put it up against my car. It's like, Larson's quarter panel is a quarter-inch higher than ours. How do you know? Are you sure it was on that thread of your jeans and not the other one? But that's some Northeast shit, man.
You're a hands-on guy. right? You were in Atlantic City this weekend.
You come
asking
yelling
me about
at me,
anti-dive, about anti-dive on your uncle's TQ midget, right?
Yep.
You build all your own stuff. We've worked together a lot on your modifieds and super late models. How much has trying to understand the next gen car and how different it is from everything else we've raced kind of thrown you for a loop?
I don't have to understand it. That's not my job.
Well,
that goes back to exactly what I was saying earlier. I just want to focus on what I used to when I was younger, and that was just driving the heck out of a race car, and that was it. But what I will say is understanding, it certainly helps you break down what you're feeling for those around you. And I think at that point, it's going to make you better in the long run. If it all works out, it certainly makes the process easier to get the car better. But it's definitely, independent front and rear suspension. It's the same.
Well, that was my next question. You kind of answered it. Was, does being disconnected and just driving, does it help you or does it hurt you? Like, do you have to be connected and know what springs you have in it to understand?
No, I would say.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Can I interject? Can I answer this for you?
Go ahead.
I think you and I are very similar in this regard. We know how to communicate what we need out of the car better because we know what springs are in it. And I don't know how to bolt a left rear suspension on this car because I haven't done it. I've watched people do it. But I do know if the left rear needs more weight on it, right, or how much rear bar the thing needs.
Yeah.
And I think that's what our strengths were. Our strengths used to be we could get in there and change the front suspension for them.
Yeah.
But guys at Stewart Haas, they don't want RP initialed on the checklist. They don't want CL on the scale list. They just don't. They don't pay us to do that.
Well, yeah, and there's other areas for us to focus on to continue being better because where you and I could put a car together a lot quicker than a lot of other guys in this garage, there's other things we can focus on to keep being better from a racer's standpoint.
What's different? What kind of tools are different and available to you being with a big manufacturer-supported team, being SHR, versus where you've been in the past? Obviously, Johnny Davis.
Yeah, even going from the simulator, going with my own team and working through some of those checklist items, that's never something I was able to do. Just, hey, we're gonna put some rebound in here, some more compression or some more high speed over here, and it's just like, you can go through a list of feels that may trigger something or not before you even go to the track. And ever since we've cut back on practice, you as well as me, we both know, how many tests have you done in your career? So
it was a joke because the first cup test in my first NASCAR test of all time was the first next gen test at the Roval when we went, the first next gen test. So the only time I've ever tested a cup car is with the next gen car last year.
Yeah, I have 1.5 NASCAR National Series tests. Yeah. One of them being Las Vegas when we went to the new
big spoiler,
and then a half a day in a Xfinity car at Charlotte. That's it. That's all I've ever gotten. And it's certainly you have guys back in the early 2000s. I hear stories all the time. They were gone all the time.
Dude, Joey was 15 years old, burning Kentucky up. They had to repave the place because they made so many miles around.
Harvick talked about it, how much they tested for Earnhardt, and he already had his car that he liked that Earnhardt didn't like.
Yeah.
Just at what point? So being like those guys were in a race car a ton.
Yeah.
And you've talked, but you're not. You're going to step away from your short track racing this year and just focus on cup racing.
Yeah, and I'm certainly a believer in racing more is always better, but there's certainly other things that I could focus on. I've done it. I go to Stafford all the time. I've raced the Wheel Modified Tour. I've won a lot of races. I've done all that, but I've become so hands-on that it's just too much for me to prepare a race car to go do that stuff while trying to focus with this Cup Series effort. And maybe if everything's going really well, I might think about doing Loudon just because that race is so much fun to race. But there's just so much other stuff that you need to focus on to be, I would say, competing for wins and paying attention to it all.
What about Richmond and Martinsville?
Well, it's also not like you want to. It's not like you don't want to do those things, but you also don't want to distract yourself from your one opportunity.
If I felt comfortable showing up and driving, I could do that.
Yeah.
But I'm too stubborn, and at this point, I've been racing modifieds a long time that I want to be very involved. It's just like when I went to the Snowball Derby, I didn't want to rent someone's race car. I wanted to build my car. I wanted to be involved in the process, and ultimately, with the guidance and Chris Gabehart, who's he was a super late model standout badass and he's a really good crew chief. We went down there and we ran way better than I'm sure a lot of people thought we were going to. Yeah. So, but that's where I've gotten in my career. When it comes to short track racing, I want to build them. I want to set them up. I want to do the whole thing. So
you've grown up and you've been doing it obviously your entire life, but I feel like there's been a disconnect between the short track guys and Sunday guys. Like there's not a very good connection or crossover. So it's awesome when you see guys like yourself get opportunities to drag an entire Northeast fan base, particularly with modifieds, to the track. Some of them might hate you, but they're also going to tune in to see how you do.
Yeah.
Right? How do you think who's the next Ryan Preece coming up?
Man, there's a lot of good racers up in the Northeast. A lot of young kids, and they keep getting better. I was 25, I think.
How old are you
24
now?
24 or 20, whatever it was. I'm 32.
32.
When I got my first Xfinity start, I was older. I wasn't 18 years old.
You don't have that. I mean, we talked about this with Harvick at length when he was in here last week that, at what point is age just a distraction? And you're probably more mature and ready to go right now than if you got
I think about this all the time. When I have a kid one day, and if he races or she races, I'm not going to throw, like me personally, I'm not going to throw him into it because I was that 14-year-old kid that was racing a modified. Yeah. My dad, I'll say this, he did it right. When I was 14 years old racing a modified at New Smyrna, he made me start last every single night. He made me do all that stuff. And the first year, I wasn't even racing. I was just getting laps.
Why do you think he made you start last? For the listeners.
Well, first off, we didn't have, it was a 1991 Troyer. This thing was not going to win the race. This was just here to get laps, right? Probably more so just, I would say the first year, half a year was just getting laps and earning respect, which is not just being out there, but doing all the right things and probably not making a fool out of myself, right? Being that 14-year-old kid that goes out and wrecks thousands of
grown man.
Yeah.
Learning how to pass, learn how to have some racecraft.
Yep.
Like dude, Harvick said it, and I think every dad listening to this needs to know, nobody gives a shit how you finished in a modified race when you're 14.
Yep.
Nobody cares. They didn't ask you when you walked in the store, Haas, hey, we were going to hire you to drive 41, but we saw at Smyrna you run last when you're 14, so we're going to go with somebody else.
Yeah.
And, my first two-wheel modified tour races, it was our family-owned team. I didn't qualify for the first two wheel modified tour. That's right. Yep. So I didn't qualify. That was just part of that process of, it was me and my dad. We didn't hire some great crew chief. It was just us learning it on our own. And that's part of the, some of the things that you're going to take, trying to figure it out.
It's a grit, man. It's the resilience and the grit that it builds. There's a common thread of everybody's journey looks a bit different, but it comes from a very extended amount of time of the resilience and the grit and not giving up to sustain a career on Sundays. Because there's a reason why you drove for 3 years at JTG, and then you're also getting another look back. Rarely does somebody lose their seat, or your seat got sold essentially, right? So they downgraded to one car, or downsized to one car. Rarely do you see somebody go back down and then go back with a better opportunity.
Yeah.
Dude, who else lost their deal and found themselves in a better situation was Silver City kid, not Joey.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you look at Joey, right?
And
we talk about driver crew chiefs. You put the guy who was the prodigy, right? Talking about the guy, youngest Xfinity driver ever. He was the youngest to do everything since Jeff Gordon. And you put him with Zip and that 20 team that was winning everything with Tony, and they didn't get along, right? And they just didn't mesh. And he needed, like, Joey says, look, I went in there and I was living in my parents' house. These guys are paying mortgages with kids. How are we supposed to get along?
Yeah.
But, he finds himself out of there and with Todd Gordon, and he just needed a team that believed in him, fresh start, and now he's got two championships.
And that goes back to what I talk about, personalities, communication, and sometimes even if you really like each other, you're not going to get along when it comes to racing. And that's where I go back to, Chris Gabehart. When him and we only did 3 races together, but we've had a relationship of getting to know each other and still text all. I just talked to him the other day. That's 5 years or 6 years later, and that was just off 3 races. And then fast forwarding to where Chad and I, we're both racers. I mean, he's big into your micro stuff, so I was picking his brain about if I was when I build my TQ, like, hey, how can we do this? And that's the same thing. We just share.
TQ?
I already told you I'm gonna come kick your butt.
Why don't you build one with me and Jimmy?
Huh?
Why don't you build one with me and Jimmy?
Because I want my own. I talked to Jimmy about this the other day. I don't want everybody else to have what I have.
Did you have fun in Atlantic City?
I want to have an advantage. I always have fun in Atlantic City.
Yeah. I suck.
Plenty of fun to be had.
Suckfest 2023.
You know, that is the most underrated winter racing, I would say, in the like. It's just so
awesome.
much fun.
I wish
I
you
don't know,
stayed for
you
Saturday.
ever seen those snowmobiles in Wisconsin?
No.
You know what?
I don't know. They probably sound pretty fun. I don't know.
You know why it's better than the Chili Bowl?
Why?
Because they have freaking starters.
Yeah.
You could just start it and drive away.
It's true.
Amen to that, brother.
Yeah.
Hey, preach.
Mm-hmm.
Preach to that. All right. So, have you been on the show before?
I haven't.
Well, welcome again. Glad to have you. But every guest at first year, it was one question. Second year was two. And then as you see the trend, now there's three questions. Question number one. If you had to pick one car and one racetrack to race at the rest of your life, what are you going with?
USAC sprint car, wingless.
Have you ever driven one of those?
I practiced one, at Stafford.
Oh,
but I would do it at IRP. Yeah, that's a bucket list item. Yeah.
Well, like the 18, like the tires about as wide as that table.
Oh, I loved it. Every bit of it. 900 horsepower. I mean, literally, they talk about drag cars and that shake they get when they're trying to slip the tire. That's what that had. It was unbelievable.
Did you ever get full throttle?
I did, but it didn't make me go faster.
No, yeah.
I was like, I felt like I was just,
at Stafford, you said you
slow. Yeah.
And you would race it at Stafford or IRP?
IRP. Yeah.
So a asphalt sprint car at IRP. That's a first too.
Yeah, that is a first.
Great answer. Question number two. What's the most embarrassed you've been at the racetrack?
I mean, that's a tough one. What's the most embarrassed? Probably last year's 600 when we spun out on like lap 12. I mean,
by yourself?
It did it in practice, and then it did it in the race.
On the bump stop.
Like, where did it even? Yeah.
On the bump stop.
Yeah.
That bite you, bro.
It'll get you. I mean, from a driver, like, there's so many things you're worried about, and now you're worried about, like, bottoming out of shock and spinning out or whatever. I don't know. I mean.
And then didn't you get hit by somebody?
Yeah, so it just knocked it. All it did was break the toe link, but we couldn't get the bolt out. So we just ran out of time. I mean, they had that car because it was going to race at not Coda. It was up in
Road America.
Road America. They were racing that in like 3 weeks. They had it ready to go to Road America that night because they brought it back and started getting it ready. It was just a tough deal.
You don't have any good embarrassing modified stories?
Oh, yeah, Frank Rocco. I'm sorry. I never apologized to you in person, but I remember that one was pretty embarrassing. It was we were running first and second, and I couldn't get around him. I was trying low, trying high, so I thought I was going to push him into the corner. And when I tried to push him into the corner, he got on the brakes really hard to hold the bottom, and I couldn't get off him. So I felt really bad about that one.
Right up to the point of impact.
12 years later.
No relation to Keith Rocco.
No relation.
When we were in Rucco and Rocco, but Keith Rocco, when we were in the bar in Atlantic City on Saturday night, I introduced him to everybody. Because I drove for him this year, and I was like introducing him to his own wife, to Crowley, to Jim, everybody he already knew. Hey, you guys know my friend Keith? He's like, would you just shut up already?
You must have had a half a beer and been drunk.
I had three quarters, and 5.5 tacos from Bally's Taco Stand.
Question numero tres. What is your first racing memory?
My first racing memory, are we talking like anything? Could be with my dad. My first racing memory was actually when my father drove me in his late model up our road. Kind of like, my dad was probably shaking the car down, and I was out there. I was probably 4 or 5 years old. Just threw me in the passenger side, and we went for a ride. 4 or 5 years old.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I had another question too. I might change it. This is all a work in progress.
Yep.
Is that when you got bit by the bug of like when when you wanted to do it?
Yeah, I don't necessarily really know. I think it's just that's what you grow up around, right? It's no different than you guys. When you grow up at the racetrack, you don't know anything different. I went and played baseball for like half a year, but it didn't interest me. I loved racing. I loved being around it, and it's just been really all I've ever wanted to do. So, I mean, as soon as he put me in that race car.
You never got bit by a bug, though. I don't think anybody here did.
I did.
I figured it'd be like we just really never had any other option.
Dad wanted me to do anything else. That's why I had a baseball field behind the shop, batting cages. He put soccer goals up, basketball hoops, and also paved a go-kart track. That was his first mistake. But I was this would have been 97, so I'd have been 6. I remember I was holding Mom's hand walking through the garage after a Darlington Busch race. And it was, back then, the front stretch and back stretches were flipped. So the Busch garage was where our Cup garage is now. I remember the exact point that I was, and I remember seeing all the cars. They were all beat up, sandblasted, just the smells, and just like how raw it was. And I walked that loop as like I'm a 6-year-old kid every time I get to Darlington. Like, this was a spot where I'm like, ooh, like this is what I want to do. That was probably 6. That was actually where you just grew up going to the racetrack, but that was when like it bit me for sure. All right, buddy. I appreciate you coming to the studio.
Yeah, thank you.
Damn good to see you.
It was great.
I'm excited to bang doors with you here this weekend too. It's gonna be fun.
Yep.
Everybody, Ryan Preece, give my man driving the 41 some love this year. Welcome back to Sundays. This is Ryan Preece.